Hey Vikings fans, what's up? It's Wabi. It's time for another edition of the Pick Six. I know we're all frustrated and disappointed after the loss to Seattle, but we got another crack at an NFL team. It's the Miami Dolphins this Sunday. So let's solve some problems and answer your questions here on the Pick Six. The first question comes from Kathy. What happened from the beginning of the season when Diggs and Thielen were consistently getting the ball to now where they're practically non-existent? Well, Kathy, defenses picked up on the Vikings trick and they are giving a lot of attention to Diggs and Thielen. There are two things the Vikings can do to combat this. Number one, use the other weapons on the field. If they're going to give so much attention to those two guys, there should be some open receivers elsewhere. But number two, keep throwing it to Diggs and Thielen. We've seen these two guys make contested catches in traffic and coverage before. I expect Cousins to keep going back to the well down the stretch. Question number two comes from Ray in Oregon. What's the fix? Is it all on the offensive line? No, Ray, this is football, the ultimate team game. It's never on one position or one player. The offensive line can and will play better down the stretch. I love that the Vikings have two of their final three games at home where the offense performs much better. But the Vikings need to play better around the quarterback. That includes the offensive line as well as the backs, tight ends, and receivers. The next question comes from Gerald. We do not do well with running quarterbacks. Outside of placing a spy on them, what else can we do? Well, Jared, when it comes to giving up rushing yards to running quarterbacks, the Vikings can do a better job of containment. But remember, quarterbacks in this league make their money and win games by throwing the ball. The Vikings have done a pretty good job against running quarterbacks like Russell Wilson and Mitchell Trubisky. In fact, against those two quarterbacks this season, the Vikings have intercepted 3 passes, mostly by forcing those quarterbacks to run around, and they've only given up 1 touchdown pass. So I like the job the Vikings defense has done against some of these mobile quarterbacks. Now there's going to be another test coming up down the road. The Vikings close the season with another matchup against Trubisky, so we'll see what happens. The next question comes from Mark in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I know we have talent. I know we can beat anybody anytime. The missing link is complementary football, Mark. Remember the 13-3 Vikings from a season ago? Really good example of a team that played complementary football. This season, as Mike Zimmer said last week, the Vikings just haven't put it all together quite yet. Here's a good example from the Seattle game. The offense couldn't punch the ball in on 4th and goal. Defense comes out onto the field, 3 and out for the Seahawks offense, a short punt. Vikings offense starts on the 41, but they only drove 22 yards, had to kick a field goal, and it was blocked. So there's an example of the Vikings defense stepping up, but the other two phases of the team not playing complementary football. If the Vikings can get back to doing that over the final 3 weeks, they're going to make the playoffs. The next question comes from Randy in Canada. Thank you to the defense for never giving up. How about that Vikings defense? After the first month of the season, this group has stepped up their play and they played a great game against the Seattle Seahawks. They're on the road going against Russell Wilson and company. They held Wilson to 72 passing yards for the whole game, 2 of 10 for the Seahawks on 3rd downs, and they even forced a turnover down inside the red zone, inside the 10-yard line at the end of the first half. So I love the way the Vikings defense is playing coming down the stretch. I expect them to play better and better over the final 3 games and help carry the Vikings into the postseason. The final question comes from Mike in Olivia, Minnesota. If the playoffs started right now, the Vikings would be in the 6th seed. Who would they play on Wild Card Weekend? Well, if the playoffs started right now, you're right, Mike, the Vikings would be the 6th seed. They'd be on the road at the Chicago Bears, who are currently the 3 seed. It'll be the Bears or the Cowboys, most likely in the 3rd or 4th seed if the Vikings can't track down the Chicago Bears for the division. The Seahawks right now are the 5 seed, but there's still lots of time for all of that to be shuffled up. 3 games to go, and a lot of the teams in the hunt, they play each other. So I expect this playoff picture to be shuffled quite a bit. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Pick Six. We'll be back next week after the Dolphins game, so keep sending your questions into the email address at the bottom of the screen. In the meantime, stay right here on Vikings.com and the Vikings app. Tons of great content coming to you this week as we get ready to play the Dolphins.